Welcome. I'm Dean Leander Harding. I'm the Dean of the Cathedral of All Saints in the City and Diocese of Albany. It's the Cathedral of the Episcopal Church in this part of the world. And this is a program on our YouTube channel called Cathedral Conversations, which we invite people to this program that are well-known Christian leaders and thinkers and people that we think will be able to provide us with some new knowledge and some inspiration. And today, I'm just thrilled to be able to welcome Ismael Hernandez. And Ismael is the executive director of the Freedom and Virtue Institute. I'm going to let him tell us more about his story, but he's come a long way from his native Puerto Rico. He's done graduate work in political science and political thought. He's a writer, a thinker, an educator, and somebody who does much hands-on work with the poor and has for many, many years. He's written a number of books, and we'll link them all to the bottom of the video. But one in particular that I hope we might be able to talk about today is called Rethinking Charity. I met Ismael through the Acton Institute and just have been very uplifted and inspired by our friendship and our conversations. So Ismael, I always start out these conversations asking, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your journey of faith and how you've come to do the work that you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. Well, as you know, Father, I'm from, as you mentioned, I'm from Puerto Rico. I was born in the 1960s in the city of Maya West, in the western part of the island. And I come from a communist household. My father was a communist, one of the founders of the Communist Party of Puerto Rico that started in January 11th of 1959, was called the Movement for Independence, and 10 years later became the Socialist Party of Puerto Rico. And he was very active in that kind of environment. He had been a member of the Communist Party USA here in the United States when he lived here for many years, and he was also a Black Panther or associated with the Black Panthers here in the United States. Moved to Puerto Rico, married my mom, and started to found the Socialist Party there. And so I grew up with no faith. You know, it was a cultural Catholicism that imbued the culture, that everyone was Catholic, but because they were baptized when they were children, that was it. And my father was a Marxist. He used to tell us that America was the enemy of the human race, and any decent person would fight to destroy America. And his daily harangues against Yankee imperialism were common. And listening to Radio Havana was on 24/7 at home, and I remember having to listen to the never-ending speeches of Fidel Castro when you're 6 years old, and you're forced to listen to a 4 or 5 hour speech. You can imagine, and many images in those days. Not much of faith, besides again what was imbued in the culture. And my father was again indoctrinating us. We will sell propaganda. He will go to Cuba. That was our life. At the same time, my mother was, as I always say, a humble Puerto Rican woman in the 1960s. She used to say, well, if he says we're communists, okay, we're communists, but I don't care about that. I care how we're going to feed these 4 kids we have at home. And we cannot feed because, my father was always followed by the FBI. I have at home still with me his FBI file of 40 years of communist activity, 2 court cases for terrorism, and a life dedicated to the Marxist movement. My mother, again, was a cultural Catholic, but she wanted us to have some religious instruction. and she would sneak my older brother and myself to go to mass with friends without my father knowing about it, because he wouldn't have allowed it. Religion was the opium of the people that keeps you thinking on heaven while the capitalists are having a good time here on earth, as my father used to tell us. My mother had many experiences, like seeing my father telling her, I will give the life of these four children we have at home for revolution, and I would see her cry constantly for my father saying things like that. But deep inside of me, I wanted what my father was offering, because it was, I always say, intoxicating. It gave us this sense that we had this radical capacity of changing the world by the actions of this small party that was maybe 1,000 people in the whole island, but we were the vanguard of the proletariat. We were, one day we would change the world. And I also remember my mom one night, in the middle of the night, running out of the home to speak with these two men inside the car in front of our home, constantly, very conspicuously there. And many years later, I found out that they were FBI agents, and how my mother suffered because of their constant surveillance of the home. But I joined the party with my father. I wanted that part of that. At the same time, my mother sending me to mass with friends developed me a concept of God, and I didn't know what to do with this. On one side, Marx, and the other side, Jesus. The revolution and the kingdom all merged together. My Christianity was really merged with my Marxist understanding. There was no other way of understanding it but that way. Uh, I went to the University of Puerto Rico to study political science, because I wanted to destroy America intellectually. And I got involved in the movement in the universities, that the Socialist Party was very interested in that kind of movement among the students, and the movement in the factories where my father was. For 2 years, the only income that was coming to the home was $25 a week, that my older sister, who lived in New York, will send to my mother, because every time my father got a new job, he was an engineer, but he will get a new job and he will try to organize the workers, and here comes the FBI behind him, and he will lose one job after the other after the other. Uh, he was always trying to work, but he couldn't abandon his ideas. And but to make a long story short, I wanted to merge that double consciousness that had been created in me, religion and Marxism at the same time. I always say, well, what was a good Catholic and and communist boy to do but to join the Jesuit order? That was the place for me. They were all Marxists. This is the mid 1980s. This was the province of Central America that the Jesuits belonged to, and they were all involved in the working in the revolution of Central America and liberation theology. And I was looking forward to be there. They were going to be sending me to Sandinista Nicaragua, the heart of the revolution, to study philosophy after my first 2 years in Jesuit seminary. I remember my interviews to become a Jesuit. You had to have 4 interviews by 4 different Jesuits, and they all wanted to know about my politics. And they didn't ask me any question about my faith.
Yeah.
uh,
I have to
uh,
say, during my ordination process, a lot it was quite similar in a way. I was
but
asked about every hot topic, social cause you could think of, but nobody asked me very much about Jesus.
yeah, yeah, that's true. That's what for me. But I was very comfortable in the order, and I was looking forward to go to study philosophy with the great masters of philosophy of liberation theology that were professors or lecturers at the University of El Salvador, that was near the border with Nicaragua, and I was going to be living in Nicaragua and studying in El Salvador Ignacio Ellacuría. You know some of these men, Father Juan Luis Segundo,
Yeah, I had
Gustavo Gutierrez.
Gutierrez as a teacher when I was at Boston College, and
Mhm.
Boston College was mixed in those days, but the liberation theology was very much in the air, and
Yes.
Gutierrez, who was personally impressive, he was an impressive person.
Mhm.
He had a both the commitment to the poor, and he did have a deep spirituality, but he was very
Mhm.
matter of fact about being a communist in his political, you know.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
he was a great hero at Boston College in the time that I was there.
I imagine, yeah, and the Mary Knows sisters and all of these, but especially the Jesuits in Nicaragua. There were even two houses in Nicaragua: one house for the conservatives and one house for the revolutionaries. They had to separate them physically because they couldn't live together. It was like two orders within one, and of course, I was gonna be with the revolutionaries, and I was looking forward to that, and it never happened. In 1987, seven Jesuits were murdered in El Salvador,
Yeah.
and and that's what prevented me from going there. They decided not to send us to Nicaragua out of concern for our safety, and I was really so upset. I was angry because I didn't want to be a priest. I wanted to be a Jesuit priest in Nicaragua fighting America. That's different. When that didn't happen, they wanted to send me to here to Fordham here in the United States to study philosophy. And I said to them, I'm leaving. I'm going home. I'm not going to America. I hate America. I hate the guts of the monster, as we used to call the America in the party. And uh, that was after my experience with the it was a good experience in the Jesuit order. It's not as if it wasn't a good experience in many ways. My experience in the hospital experience, they sent me to an AIDS hospice, which was the most difficult experience in my life, but at the same time it was an experience with suffering. But my desire to go to Nicaragua never happened, and I went back to Isabela, Puerto Rico. Angry, we were living now in the town of Isabela, and but eventually some friends of mine convinced me to come to the guts of the monster anyway to study philosophy, to start to further my studies on my own, and
In
I
Mississippi.
I landed at the University of Southern Mississippi, of all places. You can imagine this black Puerto Rican communist lands in Dixie.
God works in mischievous ways is one understands.
Yes. Yeah, so it was a really cultural shock. Yeah, I couldn't understand the English. I always said that's not English what they speak there. I couldn't take the coffee. I couldn't take the what you call coffee here. I couldn't take the food, the culture, and at the same time, that's what saved me. Because for the first time in my life, I was challenged in the safe assumptions of my ideology. And we were an authentic Marxist-Leninist household. All our relationships were Marxist. All that we knew was Marxism, and to get away from that quasi-religious experience and system of thought, and be forced to be confronted with a different set of assumptions is challenging and difficult, but necessary. I mean, and sometimes we don't have that opportunity in life. We live in a context, and things make sense within that structure, and outside of that structure, things don't make sense anymore. And that's what happened to me. I was thrusted into a reality that I did not choose and I did not want. But at the same time, I began to experience certain things that really challenged me. I began to have fun in the hair of the workers, and my that wasn't supposed to be happening. I was having a good experience, even in Mississippi, and I had good grades in my studies. And they one day called me to the dean's office and offered me a full assistantship, paying all my studies because of my academic progress. And I said, this is not, I hate your guts and you're rewarding me. This is not supposed to be happening. But at the same time, I began to see that there was a world of ideas. Eventually, I discovered this world of ideas that I did not know existed, or I have read a little bit about them, but I had filtered them through a prism of my Marxist assumptions. Ideologies are like a pair of glasses you put on yourself, and through that prism, you look at reality, and we will see different things looking at
Right.
the same reality of external context because we filter them through these different assumptions.
Right.
And I never noticed these ideas, and I was never exposed to them. My father used to tell us, Ismael, we're not here to debate with the capitalists, we're here to kill them. We have the truth. We don't need to listen to the Yankee propaganda. So I
Yeah.
began to read. But first of all, was an experience. It was an experience that there was something different in America. And I always say that this that prism of understanding, my understanding of human dignity, of the human person as a Marxist, was collectivist.
Right.
Dignity and purpose was in the way of the revolution. That's
Right.
where reality and existence and dignity lay. And I was a drop in that wave.
Right.
And as a drop in the wave, my life had purpose. Outside of the drop, the individual uh, lacks any kind of meaning outside
Mhm.
of the wave in this perspective. I was, as I say, a curious accumulation of atoms destined to nothingness when I die. Outside of the wave, I had no meaning and no purpose.
Right.
But I began to learn in America this connection between reward and accomplishment that is facilitated because we have a different anthropology. I discovered this different anthropology that was not collectivist anymore. It was more personalist,
I'll just stop.
individualist, but more than individualist. Yes,
I just so
yes, sir.
for some that are watching, you might not be familiar with the way that we're using the term anthropology here, but we're just meaning by that we're just meaning
Yes,
the theory of what a human person is. And Marxism
exactly.
has one theory of what a human person is, but you were encountering other views of the nature of the human being and the nature of the human person and meaning and dignity being inherent in the person rather than being dependent on their participation in some historical process that might produce a utopia generations yet to come. But really, there's dignity and purpose right now, inherent, God-given in every person.
Absolutely, absolutely. In Marxism, there are historical processes that are outside of the control of the human volition of the human choice, and we participate in those processes as tokens within a system, or not as individuals who have this radical capacity of changing things. We either are part of the process or outside of the process, and then we become enemies of human progress. But in America, and I began to rediscover my faith, really, because I began to discover this reality of human dignity that is based in made in the image and likeness of God, with two moral capacities: the capacity to reason and the capacity to make choices for myself, this volitional capacity.
If I could
Uh,
just
uh,
interject for a second, Ismail, I've read a
yes,
lot of, I haven't read everything that you've written because you've written an awful lot,
yes.
but I've read a lot of it, and my takeaway is that you that's your lodestar, the dignity of the human person made in the image of God, and not, you say it so well, unique, irreplaceable, and necessary. I think is that
Unique,
right?
unrepeatable, and necessary.
Unique, unrepeatable, and necessary. And it just seems to me that in your thinking, your writing, your reflections, that's the lodestar, that's the North Pole, and you return to that over and over again, and are always sort of checking what you're proposing against that fundamental premise.
That is a fundamental premise of human dignity, that, the Bible says that God knows even how many hairs we have in our head. He sees us as uh, every human person's dignity is not greater by aggregation. Our dignity resides on ourselves. There is no more human dignity in a million people than in one person, because it's not by accumulation. It's something really powerful and beautiful, that God loves us, and it's almost why, why He loves us is really difficult to understand. But that's the only way really to encounter the other. And I began to discover that, and at the same time losing my father.
Yeah, you lost your father.
Well, because he couldn't accept what I was embracing. I was the most radical of his sons, and to see me losing faith in revolution was difficult for me. He had dedicated his entire life to these ideas, and me beginning to change my mind was too difficult. And he would not talk to me for years, and or barely talk to me. And but at the same time, I discovered that he had given me a gift that was this revolutionary zeal for ideas, and that ideas had to be real in your life, and it may cost you something. And it cost him. And many times we say that we have the truth, but it's just for Sunday morning, if it's faith, or for the political the next political campaign, if it is about politics, or it's about freedom. They had to be authentic, and he was an authentic man, and he was a good man. I am convinced that if he would have discovered what I had discovered, he would have embraced it.
Yeah.
He just didn't discover it. And in that sense, I thank him for that. But I reconcile with him. I know that at the very end of his life, he was praying and going to church, going to mass without anyone knowing about it, and he didn't want to talk about it either. But I think that God he stole heaven probably at the very end. But but as I come to America, we, as I said, we were not like this cafe latte sipping, iPhone texting American revolutionaries. We were not those who go to the rally in the morning and shopping at the Gap in the afternoon.
Yeah.
No, we were in America. I began to see that Americans were embracing that anthropology, that understanding of the human person. I was surrendering at great cost. We in many ways we are embracing it. We
Yeah.
have this radical individualism in the moral realm, and this suffocating collectivism in the social realm here in America.
That's an interesting observation. We have a radical individualism in the moral realm and a
Yes.
suffocating collectivism in the social and political realm. That's that's a very striking observation. Yeah,
Yeah,
it seems to me, if I can say so,
absolutely.
that you also inherited from your father great tenacity,
Yeah.
great tenacity, and then also a real desire to change things, to have real change.
Yes,
And so you
yes.
got your master's degree, and then you went into nonprofit work, and tell us about that.
But yeah, I went to Florida, and I became an employee of the Catholic Diocese of Venice in Florida, and I became the executive director of a ministry to the inner city. It was called African Caribbean American Catholic Center. But I began to observe this false anthropology, this false understanding of the human person that many times we embrace with unwittingly. We don't know that we are embracing the false anthropology, because it was a very transactional attitude towards the poor.
So tell us what that means, a transactional attitude towards the poor.
Yeah, a transactional attitude is this idea that the compassion is giving stuff away to people. We give them stuff and free stuff and free stuff. And sometimes the dignity of the human person cannot breathe under the weight of the free stuff we dump at them. We see first the empty hole of need. That's what we perceive first. Then we look at our program and our offerings. And at the end of the exercise, we look at the poor and the eyes of the poor. And we instrumentalize the poor by thinking that what they need is simply items or goods and services. So we change those goods and services from one set of hands into another, and we call that Christian compassion. And we don't realize sometimes that we are invested in the problem, not invested in the solution. It's not intentional. It's not but the problem is that it is really an emotional exercise about how we feel in helping the poor. And as you say, it's only a surface touching the deeper human need. People are in crisis because they are yelling and shouting at the world, I am here. Why? Because in crisis is the only time that we actually see them. And so they are and so they use crisis as a way of finding meaning and purpose in their lives. If we stop at the items they need or the services they need, we never discovered again that they're unique, unrepeatable, and necessary.
Yeah.
That's so important that everyone is necessary. And sometimes one poor is as good as the other if we don't get to know them as individual persons. One poor has the same needs as the other poor person. Why? And we gravitate towards their biological needs, not their existential needs.
Right.
And part of it is because it's easier.
It's easier. Yeah. It's easier to, I know one of the stories that you told, and it challenged me a great deal. For 8 years, I had a wonderful summer job. I taught in a seminary in the wintertime, and then in the summer, I had a seaside chapel in Maine, and just a couple of blocks from the ocean. And
Yeah.
every year we would collect backpacks and we would fill them with school supplies. And it was very beautiful
Yes.
in its own way. It was very beautiful. People really
Sure.
loved it. Uh, you know, um, a wealthy couple would come, to take their vacation on the coast of Maine. They'd go to the local Walmart and they would come to the chapel and they would have 50, even 100 backpacks, all
Yes.
filled with
Yeah.
all filled with great stuff. And
Yes.
people would write personal letters, and
Sure.
we gave the backpacks to it was a shelter for victims of domestic violence. So often they had to leave. They didn't have anything. So it wasn't that it was bad in
No.
any way. But I listened to you tell the story about you being in charge of one of these programs one time. And well, why don't you tell
Yes.
that story about the
Yes.
backpacks?
Well, many years ago, I went to one of these events, this massive distribution of school supplies. Were good, as you mentioned, good, decent people who are trying to do good. This is in no way an attempt to demean their good intentions. The idea is that good intentions are not enough. Good intentions is only the key to unlock a door that now you have to open and walk through it. But I went to this massive distribution of school supplies where I saw black and brown kids getting the free cheap school supplies from a group of white people. And I asked myself, why is always us in the receiving end? Why is us? Why? I want to be in the giving end. It feels better to be in the giving end, and it doesn't have to be this way. But why? And I asked myself, what are these kids learning from this exercise? And I discovered that they were learning that to be passive recipients of magnanimity, that they just stand in line and some stranger meets your needs. and that there is benefit at the end at the long lines of dependency. And this is the normal way of meeting my needs. That's the most disastrous of all the exercise is what are they learning from this exercise? They are passive. They are scenery in the drama of our good intentions. Our good intentions are the protagonists of the story, and they are just there and so I ask myself, why don't we give them a better gift? Why don't we make them work for it? If you look at Genesis, work was a gift of grace. Jesus didn't tell Adam and Eve, go to the garden, the food is ready. No, he said, tend the garden.
If I could just make a exegetical comment, the
Yeah.
word that's used for work in Genesis is a word for sacred work. So it's the work the priest does in the temple. So the work is the gift of God is really
Yeah.
sacred work, you know. So it's there's a high view of
Sacred.
work in the
Yeah.
book of Genesis.
Exactly. Absolutely. That's why God imbued us with certain capacities. Capacities are in view of their actualization. If he gave us the capacity of volitional capacity of choosing and of reasoning, he expects us to actualize those capacities. So the systems we create to help the poor, if they reflect the reality of the human person, people prosper. If they don't reflect the dignity of the human person made in the image and likeness of God, people languish. They discover that they can get more or less well fed. They can get more or less well fed, but still in the bondage of dependency, and always being seen as mouths to be fed, bodies to be clothed, and problems to be solved. Not persons with dignity that want to work.
Here's an observation of mine. I don't know what you think of this, but there are a lot of mentally ill people on the street now,
Yeah.
you know. And one of the things that fascinates me is the way they will make work for themselves.
Hmm.
You often see them pushing grocery carts or wagons or, some kind of transportation that they've cobbled together for themselves. And
Hmm.
a lot of them are really picking up, they have these huge bundles of returnable bottles and things like that.
Yes.
But
Yes.
others of them have these odd collections of junk, they've picked up
Yes.
that people have thrown away. And what I make of that is how deep it is to have to work,
Absolutely.
to labor.
Absolutely.
It's
It's,
deep.
it's embedded in our
It's
nature.
embedded, and then to
Yeah.
have something to show for your labor. So they're saying,
Absolutely.
"Look, here I've
Absolutely.
been working. Here's what I can show you."
Absolutely. And that's what I discovered, and that we started a program, we call it the Self-reliance Clubs.
Well, tell us
Uh,
about that.
yeah, what we decided to do was, why don't we make them work for it? So we will go to the schools and start these clubs, and the kids will work at school, doing all sorts of entrepreneurial activities, because the kids are creating wealth in schools daily, but we don't realize that's happening. And we had to change again. We had to change the prism through which we look at things that we do. So arts class, gardens, all of those are potentially wealth creation activities. So we embrace those activities. The kids create products, they sell their products through what we call young entrepreneurs fairs. And at the end of the school year, and then we have a relationship with these kids throughout the year. It's not like we see them every summer at the event where we hand them things. No, 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 no. We have this relationship with them. We help them. We are joining them in a journey that whose protagonists are the kids themselves. And they earn money, and at the end of the school year, we go to a field trip to a bank. We hand them their earnings, and now they can buy their own school supplies. You see, the need was authentic,
Yeah.
but it was met here by them with our presence, not by us with their presence, and as it normally is. And that is the key: is that the authentic needs of the poor are to be met by them, with us journeying with them. And that's through compassion, because compassion means to suffer with the poor. Many times we want to alleviate the suffering of the poor, but we don't want to suffer ourselves.
Right.
And the reality through compassion is to be there with the poor suffering with him or her. And we have confused a crisis situation of need with the condition of poverty itself. And we have merged those as if they are the same when they are not the same. And because we see the condition of the poor as a perpetual situation of crisis, then we are too busy fixing the problem and we don't see them. In a crisis situation of need, the giver becomes the protagonist precisely because, through no fault of his own, the person cannot help him or herself. So that's why we intervene, and that's why we mobilize on their behalf. And if I see you bleeding on the side of the road, I don't tell you, hey, be self-reliant. No, I go and get you an ambulance because that's what you need. But you see, the focus is on the item or the transaction, not on the person.
Yeah.
But the condition of poverty is a steady state. It's a reality that they experience, and only they can change that with our help, not by themselves. We don't abandon them. We with our help, we join them in a journey, have a right to endure a struggle that is their birthright, because
Yeah.
life is a struggle.
It's much more challenging because um, if I, if I see,
Yes.
your distress and then I give you some money and then I feel good and I don't have to do anything else,
Yes.
till the next time,
Absolutely.
but I get a little vacation for a
Absolutely.
while, a little vacation of
And
responsibility
that's
for,
why many times, absolutely. And some people, and I always, when we have a training, we call it effective compassion training, because what is important is to help people realize that there is a set of principles that are to inform our action, that our action is good. We affirm people in their goodness. They give because they care. But sometimes we have to create an alternative way that they can perceive that is a deeper way of loving the poor. I always say, you have your children are those you love the most. Do you give to them everything every time they ask? Most parents will tell you no, no, Ismael. I give them the basics, but even in giving them the basics, I involve them and I challenge them. Why? Because I know that one day I will not be there, and I want them to be resilient, want to take care of themselves. But why don't we treat the children of the poor the same way? Who you love the most, the one you challenge or the one that you give stuff to and get out of my way? And to love the poor with the same love we love our children is a deeper way of loving the poor. So through this training, we teach them what we call the 7 principles of effective compassion. For example, in the 1800s, you know how Christians used to run soup kitchens. Christians used to run soup kitchens to feed the hungry, but they will make the food intentionally not as tasty. And you know why? Because they wanted the poor to aspire to something better than that. And today we give people, Ritz Carlton quality food for free. I tell you, I stay at the Ritz Carlton. I stay there because we are making poverty palatable. It's no longer a sting to
well,
it.
one of the phrases that I hear is that the system is sticky.
Yes.
and that even people that want to get free
Mm-hmm.
have a very hard time to get free because once you're in the system, once you're in the sort of
Yes.
welfare system, it's very, very, it's very, very sticky. And we all know the problem that people who actually start to work and earn a little bit of money, then they start to lose things, and there's disincentives and things like that. So the effective compassion training. I know you've done that in a lot of churches. Um, uh, how long does it take to do the training? And
Yes.
what are there some things that you've seen come out of the training that are encouraging to you?
Yes. Training. We have two types of training. One is a half a day training that doesn't involve group work, and in that training, we teach people the principles, and later on they can use those principles and work on them, and then we come alongside them and support them in that process of examining what they do in light of these principles. Or it could be a whole day training where we have group work and they have the opportunity to talk among themselves and begin to make that examination right there. So normally, the one that is more popular is the shorter one because it's less time that you have your employees out of the work. So half a day training with the principles, or a full day training on effective compassion. We have seen.
If you do the full day, then people who are working in the same team, they have a chance to say, here are the principles how would we apply these in our circumstances?
Absolutely. Normally, when you have different organizations in the same training, it's better to have the half a day. But if you have one organization or one church or one ministry, and everyone that works together, as you mentioned, is there, the whole day training is the best because they have the opportunity to dialogue among themselves because they are really the experts on what to do. And we do an evaluation on ask them a series of questions at the end that they can ask themselves in terms of the principles that they have been learning. And we showcase programs like the self-reliance clubs that became, you know, it became a demonstration project. We started with the institute with the training, and we said, why don't we create a project to showcase in practice how these principles are to be actualized? And that's how the self-reliance clubs came to be, and they really exploded across the country and beyond because people want a new way. They know that there is something wrong. They want to help the poor, but they know that there is a better way. They just don't know. They don't know how to make that next step. We have had good friends like the people in Joplin, Missouri, with water gardens, and they did our training, and they even do training themselves now. One of the things we want to do is to train the trainers. In other words, train people in your church and in your ministry to become trainers of others in your community. So it's not just us going training everyone that is needed, but no, you become a light, a point of light in your community. And you begin to train others in your community and others and others. And that's the way it has a rippling effect of goodness in the community. And that's what we want to do, to create a network of trainers that will continue to do things. Wonderful things happen. Father, I discovered, for example, a self-reliance club that started on their own in Michigan. I went and did a training, and I also spoke with the self-reliance club. Some people on their own decided to start the self-reliance clubs, and now it's one of our best clubs in Michigan. And we found that they existed more than a year after they had started. They started on their own, and the kids now build furniture and sell the
The kids
furniture
build furniture and
and
sell it.
make money for the, yes.
Wow.
There were some volunteers who had the equipment and the know-how, and they say, "This we want to do this," and they started on their own, and that's the most wonderful thing because we cannot believe that we are that necessary.
I
That's
know
the
there's some
problem.
other clubs where they do a lot of baking, baked goods and things like that.
We have baked goods, we have gardens, and especially in Florida, we have many farms. We in Cape Coral, Florida, we have a quarter of an acre farm now.
Wow.
In 1 year, they had 9,000 pounds of produce that they
Wow.
produce in
Nine
that,
thousand pounds of produce. Wow.
and they can sell that and the money goes to the club. So there is a way of doing this. That's why we don't even introduce new activities into the schools where we go. We just look at what is happening here that has entrepreneurial potential, and we embrace what is already happening, and we transform what why? Because freedom is simple, a bureaucracy is complex. So we go and try to make it as simple as possible. And because bureaucracy is the normal human response to complexity. That's what bureaucracy is. When things look too complicated, we try to simplify. But
Yeah.
we simplify by depersonalizing,
Yeah.
you become a client, a number, and the needs that are met are those are quantifiable. Eh?
Yeah.
How many bags of food we gave out, how
Yeah.
many bills we paid. Unless you are a supermarket, I don't care how many bags of food you gave you gave out. The important is how many lives you touch, and that is the key.
Yeah. That's right. Can I ask how much would it cost to bring a effective compassion training to,
Yeah.
a church or a
But
city?
yeah, normally it depends on the side of the church. We do know that there are very storefront churches, small churches that cannot afford. We had done training for $500. We normally is $3,000. But it really depends on the size of the congregation. If there are many of them coming together, then will be $3,000 to do the training.
So that's
and
real,
uh, and
quite
but
reasonable.
we don't want money to be an impediment. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's um, I really just do recommend that people read this book. It's Rethinking Charity. It is quite a deep dive into thinking deeply about the issues of poverty. And one of the things that you say that I like so much is um, you don't even want to be a supporting actor. You want to be the scenery in the drama.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Right.
It's so true. I have a friend who is an Anglican priest in Africa who keeps telling me every time I see him, Ismael, tell these Americans to stop sending us shoes and old shoes and old shirts. How can we build a shoe industry in Africa and compete with free?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is that so these transactional systems are well intended, but they miss the target. And the target is the unique, unrepeatable, and necessary human person.
They're not conducive to the building of collegial relationships. I mean, if I'm you're completely passive and I am just filling all of your needs, then we're not on it. We're this
Yes. Well,
inequality there.
no, we are not in. We are
I'm not
not
coming
in equal
alongside you.
footing.
I'm
You
really
are
over you
here
in
with
that.
stuff, and I'm down there without it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Think about our churches. In my church, we put a Christmas tree in the back, has a piece of paper with a name, and in the back of the paper says a bike. And then you buy the bike and you bring it to the church. And then we have a cadre of people. They grab the bike and they meet that family and they give the transaction. You feel good because you met the need, but you
Yeah.
never met that family. You
Yeah.
sometimes don't even want to meet that family. You just want to know that you did something good.
Right.
It gives you the illusion of success because there was a transfer of resources. That's illusory. It doesn't give you an authentic, deep encounter. Now, not everyone is willing or to do that kind of deep encounter. But if we create systems in our churches that reflect the dignity of the human person, and they know that there is an authentic encounter with these people, they will, I believe, they will be even more generous, even if they don't do it themselves. God knows our hearts and
Well, and
knows our
if you don't, I
situation.
mean, in your own story, one of the things that was moving to me, I think if I remember this correctly, that you
Yes,
were looking out the window one day and you were seeing the children or the grandchildren. It was a feeding program, and you were seeing
exactly.
it's the second or third generation.
Yes, yeah,
And
mhm.
I think that there is donor fatigue. There's such a thing as donor fatigue.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
I think that part of donor fatigue is that when people give and give generously, and then they don't, it's just the same thing over and over again. They don't,
Yes,
you know, it's just a cycle of dependency, and it's not getting anywhere. You know, it's the city where people are giving a lot of money, but the city appears to continue in a downward spiral, not
absolutely.
moving upward direction. Um, anyway, what are your hopes for your own organization now as you look towards the future?
Well, we have three main programs. We also have a commonality program, effective compassion training, and we also have commonality training, effective compassion training, and the self-reliance clubs. We want to focus in the United States and spread the clubs and the training throughout the United States and create really a network of effective compassion with churches and ministries throughout the country that are coming together around the same principles. That is my goal. That we will be the to go organization for training on effective compassion.
Yeah. And I know you're one of the other your commonality program, which you referred to. You really developed that,
Yes,
and it's again based on this deep commitment to the human person made in the image of God. And the
yes,
your view was that, and there's a lot of social service research, social science research that um, a lot of the programs that are designed to create sensitivity around racial issues in the workplace, diversity, equity, and inclusion
yes,
programming, there's now social science evidence that actually
yes,
relationships between different ethnicities are often worse after the experience of these
yes.
programs than they are. They're not making things better, they're making things worse. So you really had a vision of coming up with a different approach.
Absolutely. As you say, the research tells us research performed by the people who have been in the diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So they have been supportive. It's not people against them. They themselves say that it doesn't work. Why? Because every time you emphasize on what makes you different than me, there is a natural tendency to of avoidance. But when we discover that we have something in common as the foundation to discover our differences, people come closer. It's like I'm Hispanic, I speak in Spanish, I speak Spanish, and I'm in a room, everyone's speaking English, and I see a guy speaking Spanish on the other side of the road. I made my way to talk to him. There's something in common that brings us together. So in the commonality training, what we do is that we find what do we have in common as human beings. And what do we have in common? That dignity that is universal, the brokenness of the human person also. We are all sinners and we all are at fault. So there is no victim and victimizers. We are all victims and victimizers at the same time. And the third is the mission of the organization. You have the three-legged stool of encounter. Now that we have discovered something in common, we come closer in a journey of dialogue. And in that dialogue, I discover you, and you become my friend. And now that you're my friend, now I want to know what makes my friend unique.
Yeah.
Now I'm ready to embrace difference because I have something in common with you. And if someone attacks my friend, Father Leander, I don't defend him because he's white. I defend him because he's my friend. We have trained several different organizations, Christian schools, universities. We did Ave Maria University, Ave Maria School of Law. We are doing Lee Health, that is a health organization. We have done training there. We have been hired, and we haven't started yet, by the state of Florida, one of the departments of the state of Florida. So we want to go do that this training with businesses and government agencies, churches. It's a new vision of diversity that focuses on what we have in common as human beings, not on what divides us as human beings. And we don't box people into impersonal labels of race that are secondary to the uniqueness of every person.
Yeah. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. We've kept you for a long time. We're going to put links to your books, and we'll put links to the
Thank you, Father.
uh, Freedom and Virtue um, Institute. And it's my great hope that we be able to get you to Albany at some point in the future to do some effective compassion training with us. I would really treasure that. I think that would be a great opportunity for our church and for our city here. I think there's no shortage of. I don't think there is a shortage of good intention. I think people have good hearts, and I
No.
think they want to make. I think they want to make a genuine difference. But I do think there's a lot of confusion and a lot of we're trying so hard, but why isn't it working better? So I think there's an opportunity to try something that is different and maybe has a deeper spiritual foundation under it, which I think your vision does. So thank you very much, Ismael,
Thank you
and
so much, Father. Thank you, Father.
bless. Peace.